Well, looks like Bellular made a video about what Chris Metzen actually did on the War Within. Let's see where he's laid his little hands and changed the story, because so far I have to say the story does feel very Metzen-esque. Let's see what he has to say.
Welcome back, everyone. Today we've got pretty big things to talk about with the future of the game, even Illidan, and that's not in some unhinged lore theory way. No, we've actually got a lot to talk about across a dozen or so interviews, so let's get stuck in first with Chris Metzen, because I think his words hit a lot harder now that the campaign is finished. Most of us were too busy playing to focus on this, but Scott Johnson of The Instant sat down with Chris Metzen for a Wowcast special, and this was extremely full of things that you'll want to know about.
Oh my god, is that Scott Johnson? I've listened to his podcast for years, The Instance, and I've never seen what he looks like.
Doubly so now that we know how the campaign has ended. Take a listen to this clip.
I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, the sword, the resolution of the sword that we started with at BlizzCon, actually, that's a 13 thing. We're going to build to that. I would even say you are not prepared for that moment. And leave it at that.
Yeah, Illidan's coming back in The Last Titan. Chris may as well have just said that outright. So, will Illidan somehow be massive and fight a big Aman'Thul with Sargeras' sword? We obviously don't know. It would be a neat way to end the saga, but I can't really see how a player would fit into that. Still, though, Illidan currently serves as Sargeras' jailer, and if Iridikron's plan, which is to threaten Azeroth so much that the Titans are forced to show up so that he can basically go and kill them for revenge, if that happens, and of course the Titans are forced to the planet's aid, well, what happens to Illidan and the person that he's jailing? Maybe we'll end up with some sort of big throwdown with our big cosmic emo boys.
I mean, we know that Sargeras is stronger than his siblings, and the fact that he killed them all previously, right? They did go down fisticuffs, and he did beat them. I wonder how he would feel. He does hate them, so I don't know if he'd care about Iridikron killing them. But I wonder if there would be a moment where, Illidan Illidan would have to release him for this to happen, but Sargeras comes and basically stops Iridikron from killing his siblings, kind of like I'm the only one who gets to kill my siblings kind of moment. I don't know. We'll have to see. But he's coming back for sure. Illidan doesn't come back without Sargeras. I think that's a guarantee.
Hard to say, and I'll certainly get a lore walking episode put in the schedule for that. And if you don't know, by the way, over at bellular.games, which is our home on the internet, the lore walking podcast is just one of the many great things that our members get. That's, of course, alongside our videos, which are early and advert-free, like this deep dive into the Belladar, as well as in-depth investigations into lore and some killer guides, like our key-binding guide into all that people are loving so far. So that's the way to support the show. And now that you're hooked with Metzen, let's take it from the top and talk about what he said. So we learned that he actually showed up after The War Within was in development for around 10 months. He essentially liked what he saw, but he felt that for the 20th anniversary, they should really go all out and do something big. That led to the vision of bringing back characters and story themes and trying to wrap it all up, but they all agreed that that was way too insane to fit into a single expansion, but they liked the idea.
I didn't realize that, actually. So The War Within was already 10 months in? When he came back? Okay. I thought The War Within was an idea at the time, but not developed in any real way yet. So that's pretty interesting. So he really did have to change the story a lot if he wanted to create this whole World Soul Saga. Monarch, I told you, yeah. Yeah, so he came back. He did change Dragonflight. I guess I'll let the video play out, but he does say in the interview that he did have to change the end of Dragonflight to basically get it to work with The War Within the way he wanted it to.
Idea. Then he had the vision of doing it over multiple expansions and building something that's just massive, and he says that somehow he sold that to the teams. Of course, that's all for nothing if they can't actually make the damn thing, and that's why I'm glad he talked a little bit about development process. Essentially, he said when he came back, he was shocked at how the whole creative process was way more democratized instead of being super top-down from the leaders, which...
Well, I wouldn't say he had very little to do with The War Within, because, yeah, it was 10 months in, but he decided to create the World Soul Saga, which means he had to develop a story now over 3 expansions, so certainly he had a big role to play in how The War Within was going to tie into all of that. But I don't know about it, the general, maybe some of the smaller stories, yeah, some of that was already probably fleshed out and everything else. Yeah, he evolved it, yeah, that's probably a good way to put it.
Just how it used to be in the past. He basically agreed with the way they're doing things now, and he's taken an approach that he says is trying to marry their work, fitting his vision and sort of being his kind of cool, but then also being their art and them being excited about it. Now, he also talked about simultaneous work. This is quite something.
That'd be
so
interesting, Tundra.
they're working on all 3 expansions simultaneously. They are mapping out 13's patches, and they're even thinking about 17, up to 17. By the way, when I say 17, I mean expansion 17, which is multiple after the end of World Soul Saga. The point, of course, is this lets them have a more...
We're at 11 right now, so that's quite a ways out. Now, they did say they're going to come out with expansions faster than every 2 years. So we should be finishing up the World Soul Saga probably in 5 years, if I had to guess. Probably like a year and 8 months or a year and 6 months for every one of these expansions. So it'll take us out to about 5 years of these expansions. And then what would happen beyond that? Man, it's crazy to think that we could still be playing this game well into our 40s, at least for me. And I started playing when I was 15. Oh my God. Wow, for life.
Vision and actually work with a bit of an end goal in mind. And man, I cannot overstate how important that sort of thing is. Now, it is a little bit apples to oranges because this is an example from film, but take The Lord of the Rings. That was always planned to be a trilogy. Its principal photography was like a massive, big, sort of simultaneous bulk across all 3 of the movies. So they kind of did it all with that plan in mind. You can then contrast that with The Hobbit. The Hobbit was initially supposed to be 2 films, then it gets turned into 3, and the whole thing ends up being a shit show, basically because they didn't really have a great plan, and that meant that they struggled to pull the whole thing together.
Well, I like The Hobbit. I didn't think it was a bad movie. Did some people not like The Hobbit? I was a fan of it. I thought the Three Armies was a really good movie. Maybe I'm a shitty Lord of the Rings fan, I guess.
Suppose I can see some of those former benefits actually being
bad.
possible
It was good.
here. Now, Chris basically got so excited that he called this one of the most nuclear creative phases I've seen for Warcraft. And I think that means quite a lot from a guy who creatively led Warcraft for almost all of its existence. The thing, though...
I'd say the Rings of Power is pretty good. I know I'm getting off track now, but I think the Season 2. Season 1 was kind of shit. Then it started to pick up towards the end, and I actually think Season 2 Rings of Power is pretty good.
For the longest time, he was doing that while working on StarCraft, Diablo, and Titan, and probably other things we haven't even heard about. So with him doing so much, and old Blizzard being so centralized into key leaders, I mean, it's no wonder that he basically burnt out and, quit Blizzard for a while. Since then, of course, Blizzard kept on growing, but the problem is it was still super centralized. And that's a big problem because clear leadership and a clear sense of mission for the whole organization, that paired with decentralized command on the level of implementation tends to work best in a large organization if you actually want to get a degree of, speed and actually getting the job done. Right. That just works provided there's accountability and feedback in the process. So it seems they've basically done a better job of that. Then, and of course, as an artist himself, he talked about kind of the trade, and he basically goes off on how he tells the team to just pour themselves into their art, even if they are a bit afraid, because sure, they could be judged, but that's the role of artists. That is something that Chris, generally speaking, has done himself in his work. I think the more you know about like him as a person outside of just what he's doing at Blizzard, the more you understand that. And it's one of those things where, yes, it does lead to some things being a bit cheesy. It leads to a few of the weaknesses, but it also enables the key strengths. And with an IP like Warcraft, you can basically tell that it didn't get where it is because it's never had any weaknesses. It got where it is because when its strengths were able to shine, they really did shine. True. I think that's a strong creative lesson. Basically, he said, everyone working in the game, no matter their role, should be putting themselves in. It's risky, but it makes for, quote, genuinely affecting content. And he is right. But of course, we also all know the risks. Take a look.
I mean, as far as MMOs go, yes, Blizzard, of course, World of Warcraft's had its, its lulls and its downs, and certain character arcs, Sylvanas, to name one, is, have gone to shit, and the Jailer was a bad villain. But man, looking at MMOs across the history of, PC gaming and MMOs in general, have there really ever been epic moments as epic as, like, killing the Lich King? Jailing Sargeras, I guess you could say, or even in the Legion, some crazy epic moments where freaking Illidan destroying a Naru. Like these epic climactic moments, I don't think any MMO has touched them, personally. Now, I can't speak a lot because I haven't played a lot of other MMOs, but I just know that these moments, killing Ragnaros the first time, I mean, my God, Karazhan, there's been some crazy epic moments in terms of WoW and its lore and everything that have really hit peaks. Like nothing has ever come close to them. And everybody knows them. Even people who've never played WoW know about, oh yeah, those guys went to the Ice Crown Citadel and killed the Lich King at some point, right? Like those moments have stuck around forever. So yeah, the lore team has, when it's cooked, it has cooked some great meals, that's for sure.
A lot of the Dragonflight sort of cozy therapy time vibes. That's an example of that risk causing a bit of damage. Same goes, of course, for Shadowlands' big, like, cosmic puzzle box focus. Those are just 2 times where the creativity wasn't really calibrated. It wasn't balanced, even though some elements could be good and could work. And that's where Chris talks about his own role. He basically said he's there to help manage that. In his own words, finding a way to bend everything towards a singular purpose, but boosting their sense of ownership. So far, at least, I think that's working pretty damn well in this expansion. As for the last few bits then, other than Illidan, well, Xal'atath. So Xal'atath is a longer form villain instead of a one-and-done one. So she will weave in and out of the saga rather than just being a single raid boss that we kill. And that means that if you think about the campaign right now, we've probably seen the last of her for a while. I mean, I don't know if she'll be back again in this expansion. Maybe we'll even have to wait until midnight. That said, she did seem really mad when she teleported away. So I guess, when do you think she'll be back? Who do you think's going to take a swing at us in our next patch?
I actually think that we could see a Xal'atath or like a form of her as the final boss fight of the War Within. I could see that happening, where we get into some kind of... She baits us into some kind of battle. She's been basically doing it this entire time, especially with Illyria. She keeps baiting her into fights and stuff like that, that she knows Illyria has no chance of winning. I feel like at the end of this expansion, she's going to bait us into some kind of a fight, whether it's directly with her or with one of her, little pawns or something like that. And by winning or by doing whatever we do, we're going to lose. We're going to lose big, and that's going to lead into midnight, hour, twilight, whatever. Some of you guys say that in the chat all the time. That's what I think is going to happen. Is by winning we're gonna lose, or by doing something we're gonna find out we got played, and then bam, it's time for the hour of midnight and all that stuff, and we're gonna go straight into the midnight expansion. We done screwed up, and now we got to figure out how to fix things. That's what's gonna happen. We'll see how it goes out, but yeah, obviously we're not gonna kill her in this expansion. That's for sure.
Anyway, then Metzen said that 11.0 is not built to be the full meal. It's basically meant to be part 1
Never
of the
got
saga.
that far in Shadowlands.
You definitely feel that when you're playing it. It's not a full meal. I'd say it definitely is a filling appetizer. In some games, that wouldn't really be ideal. Thing is, though, World of Warcraft is a live game. It's an MMORPG, and that means that if it's playing to the strengths of its format, it should feel, rather than a singular feast, it should feel like a very long tasting menu where you go in lots of fun different directions and it's all very tasty and balanced. That's what we would hope for anyway. I can certainly say at least what I want is just enjoying WoW to be simple and consistent. So far, at least, it seems like we're back, but obviously only time will tell.
Yeah.
Okay.
Only time will tell. I agree. The launch of the expansion has been great for sure. It's been my favorite launch since WoD. Now, some people will be looking back and be like, "What are you talking about? That was a bad expansion." No, WoD at launch was good, man. There's some good campaigns in there, really good storylines. All the stories of the warlords and everything were so cool. I loved it. I got really into it, and then it fell off. So yeah, obviously this expansion could still go south, but so far it's been great. It's been feeling like a really good WoW expansion again. Now I see J-Mall, you're talking about Shadowlands in the chat. Look, Shadowlands had its things. The problem was once we got into like a lot of the Maw stuff and a lot of the dungeon design, raid design stuff that was going on back then, it just felt Torghast. It just all got really old really fast. And then the Jailer just wasn't an enticing enough villain to make you want to keep playing. He could have been a great villain. I think the Jailer had potential, but he just wasn't executed well. And then in the end, it just led to an expansion that didn't feel all that good.
A big interview covered, there is still so much to talk about. There were a ton of other interviews. What I'm going to do here is just bring you the key details. So first, Ian spoke to Taliesin and Avatel about a whole lot of things, but most importantly, the process of making the game. And again, Ian was basically mirroring Chris Metzen's description of things, that they used to be real prescriptive about what the team made, that it was very top-down, and they basically stopped that. They stopped that for Dragonflight, and that led to way more freedom, where essentially the setting was decided up top and the rest was mostly left to the team. Though, of course, that did go a little bit funky. I mean, just pacing and that sort of thing. Now, though, he says that they found a bit of a middle ground that's got the positives of the freedom, but there's still like a cohesive, strong creative vision to guide everything together. Also, Ian said that he himself is actually not that involved in the core game development work now, because his job is more about leading the leaders of each part of the game instead. Again, remembering that they're making all 3 expansions simultaneously, and I mean, right now they're probably making patches for at least 2 of those expansions, or at least scoping them out. So a hell of a lot of work. And this is to the degree where he and the team felt comfortable with him going to Gamescom over the early access period, rather than him having to be deep in the pit fighting fires with them over the launch. And harkening back to what I said earlier...
Yeah, we were all talking about it during this interview. We watched the Taliesin and Ian interview. We all said he looks better. Like, Ian looks less like a pale ghost of his former self, which is how he looked during... If you look at Ian now, compared to the Shadowlands interviews, he looks like two different people. He looks much healthier. He's got a little bit of a tan to him. Now, his hair is, falling out just like mine and every other middle-aged man at this point. But he looks better. He looks like he's been able to delegate more work around, which is what's needed to create expansions at the pace and speed that they want to create them now. There's no way the old system will work, for sure. So it looks like he's a bit in a better place now with the World Soul Saga.
I've got to imagine this is what's keeping WoW on its relentless schedule. There are fewer points of failure, there's more decentralized command, teams of leaders, right? And I think that is very different to the past. I mean, there are things that I have heard on the grapevine about Blizzard in the past that absolutely do corroborate the idea that it was extremely top-down, including even in like how they would handle feedback and that sort of thing. That is obviously different now. You can tell from playing the game. Next then, Holly spoke to PC Gamer and basically talked about how they've changed feedback over the last few years. Basically, instead of just looking at the forums, they now take all social media into account. They try to like directly verify things with analytics,
they go on 4chan,
and that's a part of why Dragonflight improved so much. Again, I would definitely have points of order to make on the narrative side of Dragonflight, but as an actual video game, I mean, Dragonflight was World of Warcraft getting into its best shape in years. She also said they're focusing way harder and just being faster in how they respond to feedback, which again, I think is something that you see. To quickfire the rest, Warband alts as followers in dungeons is something they're looking into because they just like to try it out. Remix content is going to come back at some point. The story mode raid will be invested in if they see the player interest. Older dungeons may show up in Mythic Plus, but those are the ones that need the most work. As an example, Grim Batol is totally different. They talked about cross-faction queued content, and that is something that's planned.
Yeah, man, we need this. It's so annoying right now when we form up a group on stream, and there's a piece of, like a horde person in our group, and we can't queue anymore. Yeah, they need to fix that.
Only for full groups, because they want cross-faction gameplay to be an opt-in thing for all players who engage in it. Then they hope to announce something on character screen customization soon. They've got nothing to share on the Brawlers Guild, but historically we know that if they bring it back, they said they want to bring it back in an evergreen fashion. Then raid checkpoints might be coming, but no announcements yet. Please, that would be so good, Blizzard. On the
raid checkpoints? What does that mean, raid checkpoints? What are they talking about? Per Marcellian's interview, Ian Hazakosa's plans are being discussed internally regarding raid spawn. Oh my god, yes, we don't have to run back. Yes, please. One of the most historically annoying things has been the long, completely unnecessary runbacks. Oh yeah, fine. Man, that'd be great. What a quality of life improvement that would be. To actually just be able to spawn back at the boss and kill him. And actually do the fight rather than, run back and somebody pulls a random mob and now we gotta all run back and kill them out. Jesus. Always been an unnecessary part of raiding.
Yet, please, that would be so good, Blizzard. On the topic of support specs like the Augmentation Evoker, basically they've got no more planned right now, but we should also consider that like there are DPS abilities that have got a little bit more support-ish, at least via talents and that kind of thing. They also said there are no plans for switching flying styles faster than it can be done currently, that private auras are staying, but they're going to be using them a little bit differently to avoid the usual problems that cropped up during Dragonflight, and mechanics that wipe the raid when failed are staying, but they're going to be in the last half of Heroic and in Mythic, where basically it is a test of the entire group, not just of some individual skill. They also said that many more combat log improvements for add-ons are planned for the future, and finally, they are aiming to get many more role-playing tools made for the game, but they've got nothing to announce just yet. So
nice. We got to make that Moonguard tune soon.
Oh, that's all pretty cool to hear, and I think mostly fair enough. Now, to blast through something that we should mention, the launch woes, because history probably shouldn't say that this was a flawless expansion launch. Most obvious one for most is the auction house. It was just flat out broken for a week. It fluctuated between being so slow that it would just drive you mad using it and then literally being turned off. We all just blamed like add-on using, cancel, scanning, map flipping things, but a Blizzard dev actually said that it was a tech change on their end that ended up doing in the problem.
So it was something that was supposed to give you more items per tab to view or something, and it just broke everything.
So there's that. And speaking of things breaking, this one is sad. Dialogue for the campaign broke. Like, the whole campaign, right? That was just crazy. So whenever I did the endgame campaign, it was great. I got all the voice acting. It was a lovely time. Whenever Matt did the campaign, Matt and our team, he got no voice acting.
I heard some people had this
problem. It was in a way
problem.
where he just assumed that they didn't have time to voice act it, and he was a little bit disappointed. He was like, why is this a bit lower budget? Why is there not voice work? Well, there was voice work. A bug was just breaking it, and that actually got even worse with the final cinematic. This is rough. It only impacted people in American realms whenever it went live for a few hours, but basically, the final cinematic, and it was a great cinematic, but it would play with the wrong audio, and that happened for players until Blizzard were able to re-encrypt the content and push a fix a few hours later. So that kind of blew. Also,
so there was a short window where people completed the campaign in America. They didn't get to see the final cinematic with voices. That sucks.
Just weird things, like say the level 70 scaling being utterly broken initially. Blizzard nerfed that within a few days, but then that did lead people to saying, aha, I see, so that if you got the early access, then you got to power boost yourself with level 70 characters, which, technically is true, but I don't think at all that they intended this. It was just some bad luck. And very rapidly, when the power leveling happened, they actually turned off the freezing of XP for level 70s, and that was just because level 70 characters would be power leveling, like, say, level 78 character, to just blast them through dungeons.
Right.
Okay, to wrap things up, Blizzard have also revealed patch 11.0.5, and it hit PTR the very next day. Kind of wild stuff. Here's a video on that, and of course, if you want to support me and the lads behind the channel, you can check out what we're doing over on bellular.games. So that's the site to go to. You can check out this video next. I'll see you over there.
Yeah, Blizzard's moving fast, man. 11.0.5 on the PTR already. We talked about all that stuff this morning. Yeah, we're moving at a rapid pace. And now Metzy boy, his fingers are in all of it, that's for sure. Yeah, so I guess when it comes to Dragonflight and the War Within, he did more of like kind of bending the storyline and centralizing the storyline into what is going to be the Midnight World Soul Saga, Last Titan. Like, he kind of brought it all into line, right? Created the one true timeline, I guess you could say. He's doing the Loki or something. But so far, what he's done, I think, has been good. What the team's done has been good, and I'm hopeful for what's happening going forward. That's for sure. I think the storyline is interesting, and I want to play to get more story out of the game. That's for sure. And it's been that way for the first time in a long time.